Okay, let's take a look at Maya's edit menu. At the top here we've got undo and redo. This is pretty straightforward stuff. In Blender we've got the object menu down here, and we can see at the bottom there undo and redo. Note the shortcut keys there as well, Shift Control Z to redo and Control Z to undo. There's also this undo history as well, which if we just press that there, we can see it gives us a list of all the commands that it's got within its history. We can change the amount of history there in the user preferences. If we just go to the editing, and we've got this global undo, steps 32, and we can see if we just go back to that undo history again, basically we can choose exactly how far we want to go back at a glance rather than repeated pressings of Control Z. So that's just something to be aware that there's that additional option there as well. The repeat command here will show us the most recent command, which in this instance we can see is ungroup, and then the recent commands list is the list of all of the recent commands, as it would say in the tin, but we can see that ungroup is at the top there, so that also gives us access to the last command as well. Note that this doesn't duplicate commands. It's quite choosy about what it will place in here. So for example, if we grab this object and move it over there, we can see that that hasn't been recorded into here as an operation. Or similarly, if we actually just, for example, just clear that selection by clicking in space, we can see that that wasn't selected either. That's not been updated into the commands list. So if we just jump into Blender and just take a look at how Blender handles this, we can see that in the tool shelf here we have a repeat section, which is repeat last and history, which is basically the Blender equivalents. Also note that with the tool shelf we can toggle this on and off with the T key if that doesn't show. We also can get that at that with the view menu here, tool shelf at the bottom there. So basically if we were to, let's just say, move this, we can see that we've now moved that, and then we can repeat the last, and then we can see that it's actually not quite as choosy. It will pretty much place everything in there. In fact, if we move that slightly less and then repeat last, we can see that we get that. But if we look at the history, we've also got multiple instances of different types of translate. So this one was the small one, so which we can do there, and then the one below that should be the longer one, which you can see it jumped a bit further there. Unfortunately, it doesn't give us very much information as to what exactly happened there, but we could always suck it and see, as the saying goes. We could just give it a try and then undo if it's not the right one. Also see that we have at the bottom of the tool shelf there, the most recent command. We have access to fine-tune what happened there, along with a whole host of other settings that are to do with that operation. Something else that we can do here is, just in case this hasn't been mentioned before, is the Shift R key is the shortcut key for that, as well as the F3 key for the repeat history, and the F6 key will give us the information that usually pops up down here in the toolbox. That will basically show it at the cursor in the 3D view, so we can see that operation there. Yeah, so just basically be aware that that will record quite a lot of different tools in there. So if we just toggle the edit mode on and off and now look at the history, we could see the toggle edit mode is also there. So that's just recording quite a lot of different things. It may not actually record absolutely everything, but there's certainly most things seem to appear in there. So that's also just worth noting. Here we have some delete options. This is very straightforward really. In Blender we can just delete something with the delete key, or we can use the X shortcut key. If we happen to be in edit mode, so just tab into edit mode, we can see that I've got this face selected there. We can press the X or delete key. I'm just going to press X for now. We can get a delete menu then. We can just specify exactly what we do want to delete, so just the face. Or perhaps we might want to delete, just collapse the edge around there. So all the surrounding edges just got collapsed. So there's a couple of options there that you can delete, which is quite handy to use. Let's just jump back into Maya because we've got these other deletes. We've got the delete by type, which might be all kinds of different things here. Lattices, just generally quite handy to clean up the scene really. One of the things that we get in here, one of the main reasons I find myself within this menu here is just to get the history, get access to the history, because in the way that Maya builds up its mesh construction history, sometimes later on down the line, commands can start going a bit haywire. So you might need to clear the history for it to start to work properly again. So that's just worth noting there. There's no reason to have this kind of translation in Blender because we don't stack up the nodes like that with the construction history in Blender, so we can ignore that basically. However, there is a select by type, so we can get certain things like armatures, lattices there. So there is a kind of a way, there isn't a delete by type, but we could just simply select by type and then hit X to delete, or the delete key. So there are some basic equivalents for the delete in Blender. Here we have some selection tools. We've got the default selection tool, which is just the typical left click to select, or we can left click and drag to generate this marquee border selection, which will basically select everything within its confines. We've also got the lasso select tool, which is just the same kind of idea, but we can generate some unique shapes for which to select within. We've also got this paint selection tool, which will enter us into a component mode level. At the moment we're in set to faces, and we can just start to paint in our selection there. Some of the equivalents within Blender for this can be found within the select menu here. We've got our circle select, which is the paint selection, and the border select, which is the marquee border type selection. If we actually just jump into, we'll just take note of the shortcut keys as well. We've got the B for border and C for circle. And there's one other for the lasso, which we'll just get to in a minute. First of all, I'd just like to mention that the standard default selection is with the right mouse button. I'm just right clicking on each of these objects to switch the selection. As soon as we enter into one of these selection types, it switches to the left mouse button. So for example, if I press B now, I can now click and drag across with the left mouse button, and that will, similar to Maya, will generate, add to the selection everything within that border. If I wanted to deselect things, what I could do is press B again, but now middle mouse button across, and now just remove those two items there. What we can also do is, when we have entered the tool, is press the right mouse button to cancel the tool altogether if that was something that we weren't meant to do. We can also press the C for the circle select. Now what we can do here is exactly the same thing. It's left to select, and then middle mouse button to remove, and then the right mouse button will cancel the selection. But something else to note about this is we can change the radius of this particular brush by scrolling the middle mouse wheel. So that's something that we can do sort of on the fly there. And then just cancel with the right mouse button. The final one, which is the lasso, can be achieved with the control key. If we just hold down control while we left click, we get that lasso there. And then to remove from selection, we go control and shift and then left click. And then we can see that that takes effect there. Also note that the selection's kind of heavy towards the pivot points of each object. So for example, if I was to lasso select around this point here, we can see nothing's really happening because I haven't included where its origin point is. So its origin is actually at the base. So if we do that instead, we can see that the object now gets selected. So those are some basic things to bear in mind, and the equivalents of some standard selection tools. In this area of Maya's edit menu, we've got some other standard selection options like the select all and deselect. These are really standard really, so let's just jump into Blender, just take a quick look at where we can find this. We can see here under the select menu, we can see deselect all, which is assigned to the A key. The D is in brackets there because we can use it as a toggle, so it's going to deselect everything if something happens to be selected, like this monkey was just a moment ago. But now we can press A to select absolutely everything in the scene again, or press A again to deselect everything. So that's fairly straightforward stuff there. A bit further down, we've got our invert selection and the select all by type. So we'll just round this off by just checking out those two options there. The invert selection can be found in the same place, which is just this inverse here. So let's just grab those two and then invert the selection there. So we can see now the remaining 4 objects got selected. Or we can select all by type, which gives us this list here to choose from. So let's just select mesh, and it's deselected the other objects and just selected our mesh objects for us. So those are the basic equivalents for this area of the menu. Down here we can see some duplicate options. We've got a standard duplicate at the top. Just select that object and then duplicate it. we can just move it out of the way and we've got an exact copy basically. In Blender, this is also really straightforward. We can just come down here to the object menu and we can see duplicate objects as there, which is just assigned to the Shift D hotkey. So we can just select it there. I'm just going to move that slightly to the side so it's a complete copy there. Also, we've got this duplicate special, which will allow us, if we have a look at the option box here, I've switched this to instance so we can create objects as instances. So if we just go Control Shift and D to do that, just to do a duplicate special, as you can see the hotkey there, Control Shift D. If I just jump into vertex mode and now start to move, we can see that these two objects are definitely instances of one another. In Blender, the way we would do this is as a linked object. We could either, in fact, let's just do it simply here. Just come up to duplicate linked, which is the hotkey Alt-D. And as soon as we do that and move that out of the way, if we were to now tab into edit mode and grab that face, we can see they are completely instances of one another. So that's, again, quite straightforward. Something else that we can do here is to duplicate with transform. We don't really need this option because in Blender, what we would do is, if I just come back to duplicate this object again, just move that out to the side with Shift D, we can see that as part of the duplicate operation, it actually records some of the vector information as well, so it's translated it slightly. So what we can do now is just press the repeat command, which is just the Shift R, and that will essentially just duplicate again with a transform. So that's basically the way Blender would do that. So if I just delete all these guys and give another cube into the scene, there's a second way that we can make those kinds of instances, which is just with the array modifier. Just thought I'd just quickly throw this in. We can come down to the spanner icon over here to the modifiers and just select the array modifier there. We can see it's given us 2 in total, which is including the original. So if we just crank that up a little bit, just increase the offset within them slightly as well, we can see we're basically going to generate lots of instances of that object. We can also stack these arrays on top of each other and have them going in opposite directions. So instead of the X direction, let's turn that in the Y direction, and again have that slightly offset there. So we can make lots and lots of different objects there that share exactly the same geometry. If you want them quite uniform and you want to be able to make sure they always conform to this particular first object that we made, that's how we would go about doing that. But those are some basic equivalents of some of these duplicate operations that we can find in Maya. Grouping in Maya will just allow us to take some selected objects and then group them to an otherwise empty node that we can see here. We can see the objects here as children parented to this group 1 node. This group 1 node also has the location of the origin of the world, so it's just completely zeroed out, that we can see the information for in the channel box over there. The opposite of that would just allow us to ungroup. So we can just remove the group there essentially. That's basically just parenting to an empty node, as I say. So we may as well just take a quick look at these as well. We've got parent there. So we could just take that object, then shift select the second one and then parent it to it. So we can see now cube 3 is parented to cube 2. Basically we could just reverse that by selecting the child and then unparenting it, and then we can see we reverse that procedure there. So those are some basic grouping and parenting are quite similar really. We just get some slightly different operations happening in the outliner there. If I just jump over to Blender, if I just deal with the parenting first of all, we can just take this object and then shift select the next object and then just go Control P and then set object to parent. We can see in the outliner, we can see this other cube is parented to the second. So if we can also see a slight dashed line in the 3D view there as well, just to show relationship lines. What we can see there. So this is the child. If we just grab the parent, everything will come with it. If we want to reverse that, we can just go Alt-P and we can clear the parent. And if we've moved the parent and we want to have the child maintain those that new position, we can just keep the transforms there. So let's just grab the child though while we do that, and then Alt-P and then clear and keep transforms, although we haven't made any transforms, to be honest. Otherwise, to be able to duplicate the grouping, I suppose what we could do there is go Shift-A to add an empty, and then essentially just grab whatever objects we wanted and then parent them to this empty. So if I just go Control-P and then set parent to object, and now just rename this to group 1 as it would do in Maya, we can see there's a couple of objects underneath here, and there they are. There's the cube and the cube.002. In fact, if we just try and move this empty, we get that same kind of idea as what would happen in Maya if we were to move it. However, the difference here is we've got an object now that we can actually select and that we can see in the viewport. Potentially you might want to decrease the size of that so that's reasonably negligible in the viewport, but we can still see that almost indicated as this kind of an orange dot now, really just to pinpoint exactly where the origin for them are. But otherwise, that's just a brief way of being able to duplicate that kind of behavior. We could also just grab that group, the empty, should I say, and then just delete it, and that will essentially just reset everything back there. There are groups within Blender though, which we can use with the Shift-G key. We can now we can just go Control-G to group them. We can notice that the wireframes of these have just turned green as well to show that they are in a group. You can have as many groups as you like, but they don't really operate in quite the same way as a group would do in Maya, as we've just seen, because they're not necessarily parented to anything. As we can see here in the outliner, these two are no longer parented to each other or anything. The groups in Blender are basically it just gives it another data block, is what it calls it, which then can be fed, that particular group can then be fed to drive other systems such as particle systems and things of that nature. And duplicated objects in some cases. Otherwise, it is quite handy to be able to just have a group if you really need to be able to quickly select a particular type of objects, because we can now go Shift-G and now we can go Select Group, and then it will just select everything else that happens to be in that group. So that's something that can be useful there. However, the grouping in this particular way won't necessarily help with the organization within the outline or anything, which sometimes is a added benefit of the grouping system within Maya. But as I say, we could essentially just replicate that kind of behavior by creating empties and then parenting them to them if need be. But those are the basic equivalents between the groups and parents and their counterparts in Blender.